Hi, welcome to Oak Creek. I'm Nick Cavagnaro. I work for the Horticulture Department. I'm what's called a Bioresearch Technician 1, which is one of their guides they have. So here we have one of my main projects this year. It's the Proven Winners test trials. Each year we do a trial test for some of the different companies. This year it's Proven Winners. They give us a certain number of plants that they'd like tested, which means growing the plants from scratch in this environment. These plants come from all over the world originally in little plugs. They go to different vendors, and the vendors then send them to us as little tiny starts. We take them in January, grow them out in the greenhouse until they're in a 4-inch pot, until the weather's warm enough to bring them outside. And you can see this long row here. These are all the plants. Each one gets a plot. The plot is made up of 9 plants that, as you can see, after the growing season, they're one big pile of plants, basically, one big mound in most plants. Some of the plants don't do as well as others, and that's partly because of the environment and different things. This year we had a vole problem, so we had to deal with the voles. But some plants do very well, like you see the sunflower here. Those are 9 plants there that started off as 1-inch plants in the beginning of the growing season, and now they're just huge. One of the things we do is each month I come in here and I sit down with my chair and have an Excel spreadsheet on a laptop computer and go over each plant, and we look at the number of flowers, the height of the flowers, the color variations, and how the plant is doing. And then at the end of the season, which is coming up pretty soon now, I'll take a photograph of each flower also. Those are put together in a little sheet that we send back to the company, which has paid for these trials, to show the results of how that plant's been doing. These plots are also done by other universities all over the United States in different environments, such as Colorado, Texas, Florida, trying out these plants to see how they do all over the country, since these plants are sold throughout the United States and probably all over the world, actually. But this is an idea here of one of the plants. It's a basil, and this actually is a culinary basil. You can cook with this, but it also has a very pretty flower, and the bees, when they're out, it's kind of early in the morning right now, but their honeybees are all over this because of the flowers. Also behind here we have strawberries, and these strawberries are meant mainly for the color of the flowers. We have a white, a red, and a pink strawberry flower. The half strawberries are not quite as good as the kind you get at table, but we can still eat these. So this is showing off the fact that this year we're doing more vegetables and more edible plants and some culinary plants that we haven't done in the past. Here we have an example of one of our larger plants. Remember, this started off as about an inch plant in January, and already look how large it's grown. This is like a taro, so we don't expect it to last. A lot of these plants, I should mention, would not last during the winter here, so they're very much perennial plants, even though this would be, they're annuals, even though this would be a perennial obviously where it grows naturally. And this is an example here showing how the 9-inch plots are laid out. You can see we cut into the plastic, and a lot of this plastic is used with irrigation tubing underneath because it keeps the weeds down. You can see there's a weed coming up here, but usually it's easier to control the weeds if the black plastic ground cloth is there. And this is also showing what happens when you have voles that eat some of your plants. And there's only a few plants left after the voles sort of got them. We also keep a backup supply of plants, so actually all those plants were eaten, and I brought the backup supply out to put it back in the plot after we handled the voles. And so here's a weed right here. So I go through once in a while, just pull the weeds out. They try to sneak in, try to keep it as clean as we can so there's no competition with the weeds. So here we have a pepper variety, and you can see this one is meant for house use and for use in a small pot. That's as large as those plants will get during the whole season, but look at the number of peppers on there. They're just wonderful peppers. I won't pick any yet because we want to count how many are there and measure them. So right now I'm leaving all the peppers on, whereas normally you probably would harvest some by now. And behind here, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4 different kinds of sweet potatoes. And the maroon one is just gorgeous, I think. The other ones, look at how they spread out. Those are, remember again, we're 9 little tiny plants that have just totally taken over those plots. Here we have an example of a plant that's not very liking the sun. So I put up a temporary shade cloth to keep the hottest part of the day off the plant. Last year we tried this same plant, did very, very poorly. This year it's doing very well because it has that shade cover. And if you go to the side over here, you'll see some begonias that are also basically being hurt by the sun. So next year I'll enlarge the shade area to take into those. And there's impatiens right below us here. You can see the flowers have a little bit faded, and that's what happens too with the sun. The flowers look great except for the fact the sun bleaches out the color. So these would be actually better in your garden in the shade area or semi-shade area rather than in total sun like we have here. So next year, like I said, I'll be putting a lot of these under a shade cloth and seeing how well they do compared to these guys here. The petunia, one of the gardener's favorite flowers, is shown here in the different varieties. The first one is just unbelievable. I mean, look at the height of this mound here. That's 9 plants that have made that huge mound of petunias. And in each one you can see it grows a little differently as far as height and spreading. We've got some gorgeous purples, some speckled ones down there, and the very end is kind of like a rusty colored one. But they completely, in the short growing season, had taken over that whole area. So you can imagine what these would do in your garden. It's taking over. And then right next to them here, we have our tomatoes. This is one variety here, which is the tall one. Then if we walk down here, do a little walk, we'll see the patio or the pot variety, the garden variety. That's as large as those plants are going to get all season. But look at the number of tomatoes on there. Some of them are just starting to turn red, and we don't pick them right away because I want to count how many are here, but you can see some of the strands are just unbelievable as far as number of tomatoes in a little tiny plant like that. And you can see here too, in the bigger ones, there are tomatoes in here. They're a little harder to see, but they are large tomatoes on this side, a little smaller sauce tomato on the far side there. These are Coleus plants, and they're totally grown for the vegetation. They do have small flowers eventually, but as you can see, the colors are just amazing, from a green to magenta to a variegated. Now you can see this is an example of a plant that did not do well this year. We're not sure why. I know some of them, you can see by the white dots there where the holes would have been cut in the ground. Those plants had trouble in shipping, so actually we only had 3 plants to start with, and one of them not doing that well, but the other ones are really looking beautiful. Again, probably more of a shade-loving plant, a little not quite as much sun, so to do better, the colors will be a little brighter. They don't get quite as bleached out. But you can see here, you can just basically see the 9 plants, 1, 2, 3, and then 3, and then 3. So you can sort of see the clump, and then eventually it'll come together and you won't see any difference at all. Well, thanks for coming along on this short little tour of our trial bed gardens, and hopefully you'll be able to come see us next year during our trials, which probably start around June and then go all the way through to September. Here at Oak Creek, we welcome you and glad to see you come back.